Millionaire single dad witnessed a stranger holding his lost child. What she whispered left him froze. Daniel Carter had everything a man could dream of. He owned a line of successful businesses that made him one of the wealthiest men in the city. His mansion stood tall on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, filled with luxury, comfort, and all the things money could buy. People admired him for his sharp mind, his confidence, and his ability to turn ideas into fortune. Yet, behind the doors of his grand home, there was a silence that money could not fill. Daniel was a single father. His wife, Anna, the woman he had loved more than anyone else, had passed away years earlier, leaving him with only one treasure: his little daughter, Emily. She was just 6 years old, with bright eyes that carried both her father's determination and her mother's gentle warmth. For Daniel, Emily was not only his child, she was his entire world. Every smile she gave, every small hand that reached for his, reminded him that no matter how lonely he felt, he still had something pure to hold on to. Daniel's life looked perfect from the outside. People assumed his money gave him happiness, but inside, he struggled with a weight no one could see. He often stayed awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying memories of Anna. The sound of her laughter, the way she had gently encouraged him when he doubted himself, the comfort of her presence, all of it was gone. In those quiet hours, Emily would sometimes sneak into his room with her favorite teddy bear. She would climb onto the bed, curl up beside him, and whisper, "Daddy, don't be sad. I'm here." Those moments broke him and healed him at the same time. Despite his busy work schedule, Daniel never let go of his role as a father. His assistant often reminded him of the long list of meetings he needed to attend, but Daniel always made sure there was space for Emily. Morning routines were sacred. He woke her up, helped her get dressed, and made her breakfast, even if it was just toast with jam. Driving her to school was his favorite part of the day. Emily would chatter endlessly about her teacher, her classmates, and her dreams of becoming an artist. Her drawings covered the walls of her bedroom: colorful rainbows, stick figures of her and her father holding hands, and sometimes, a woman with a crown of flowers that Daniel knew was Anna. Evenings were reserved for playtime and stories. Emily loved fairy tales, but what she loved even more were the stories Daniel created. He would sit on the edge of her bed and spin tales about kingdoms, lost treasures, and magical forests. Sometimes, his stories were based on his own life, disguised with imagination. Emily listened with wide eyes, as if every word was a secret meant only for her. Though Daniel had employees to care for every detail of his life, he refused to hand over the responsibility of raising Emily. He wanted her to feel loved, to grow up knowing her father was always near. He attended her school events, cheered for her at small performances, and clapped the loudest at her art displays. In return, Emily adored him. She would tell everyone, "My daddy is the best daddy in the world," without realizing how much those simple words meant to him. But beneath that bond was an unspoken fear that never left Daniel's heart. The thought of losing Emily terrified him more than anything else. She was the last living piece of Anna, the one connection that tied him to the woman he had lost. Sometimes when Emily played in the garden, Daniel would watch her with an almost protective intensity. His guards and staff found it strange, but they didn't understand the weight of his fear. To Daniel, Emily was irreplaceable, and the idea of her slipping away from him was unbearable. One bright Saturday morning, Daniel decided to spend the entire day with Emily. His work phone had been ringing endlessly that week, but he ignored the calls. Instead, he asked Emily where she wanted to go. With excitement, she clapped her hands and shouted, "The big park. I want to play on the swings." Her happiness was contagious, and Daniel felt his heart lighten just watching her. They arrived at the park late in the morning. The sun was warm but gentle, the sky painted with soft clouds. Families filled the open space, children ran around chasing each other, and the air carried the cheerful sound of laughter. Emily ran ahead, her tiny shoes tapping against the pavement, while Daniel followed at a steady pace. She stopped at the playground and immediately rushed toward the swings. Daniel pushed her gently, smiling as she squealed with joy, asking him to push higher each time. For those few minutes, he wasn't a businessman, he wasn't a millionaire, he was just a father. After a while, Emily wanted to explore more of the park. She pointed toward an ice cream cart in the distance and begged for her favorite strawberry flavor. Daniel chuckled and agreed. He took her small hand in his, and they began walking together. At that moment, his phone buzzed with an important call. It was his business partner, urgently needing to discuss a deal. Daniel hesitated for a second, then answered, thinking he could manage both listening to the call and watching over Emily. The conversation dragged on longer than expected. Numbers, deadlines, and decisions filled Daniel's ear while Emily tugged on his arm, eager to reach the ice cream cart. He nodded absent-mindedly, holding her hand loosely as he focused on the voice on the phone. When he finally ended the call and turned to Emily, his heart dropped. Her hand was no longer in his. For a second, he froze, convincing himself she must be nearby. He scanned the crowd quickly, his chest tightening. Children ran in every direction, families walked past him, but Emily's bright dress was nowhere in sight. His throat went dry, his heart thundered painfully in his chest. He called her name loudly, his voice breaking with fear, but there was no answer. That single moment shattered the calmness of his day. In his mind, images of Anna flashed, her last words, her fragile hand holding his, the promise he made to protect their daughter. The world around him blurred as panic consumed him. His wealth, his success, his carefully built life meant nothing if he couldn't find Emily. She was his reason for living, and without her, he would have nothing left. And then, just as his fear was about to crush him, Daniel's eyes caught sight of something at the far end of the park. Emily was there, safe, unharmed, but in the arms of a woman he had never seen before. Daniel could hardly believe his eyes. There was Emily, his precious daughter, standing in the arms of a woman he had never met before. Relief rushed through him first, making his knees almost weak. Emily was safe. She was not lost, not harmed, not crying. But the longer he looked, the more questions flooded his mind. Who was this woman? Why was she holding his child? Daniel's feet moved before his mind could catch up. He pushed through the crowd, his heart still hammering, his breaths uneven. Emily spotted him and smiled, waving her little hand happily, as though nothing unusual had happened. That small gesture gave him strength, but also deep confusion. If she was comfortable, why was she with a stranger? When Daniel finally reached them, his voice came out sharp, louder than he intended. Emily. He stretched his arms toward her. Emily wriggled happily and leaned toward him, while the woman gently set her down on her feet. The woman looked calm, almost too calm for the situation. She was in her early 30s, with soft brown hair tied neatly back, and eyes that seemed to hold both kindness and something mysterious. She didn't look threatening, nor did she seem careless. She simply looked at Daniel, her lips pressed in a small, unreadable smile. Daniel scooped Emily into his arms instantly, holding her so tightly that she giggled and said, "Daddy, I'm fine." He checked her quickly, brushing her hair back, making sure she wasn't hurt. Only after assuring himself she was safe did he turn his eyes back to the stranger. "Who are you?" he asked firmly, his tone sharp but controlled. "Why were you holding my daughter?" The woman tilted her head slightly, her expression calm. She was standing near the fountain, looking around. She seemed lost. "I asked her where her father was, but she didn't answer. So I stayed with her until you came." Her voice was gentle, clear, and steady. Daniel wanted to believe her, but his protective instincts made it impossible to relax so quickly. His mind replayed the terrifying image of Emily gone, and the fear made him suspicious of anyone near her. Emily tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, She helped me. I couldn't find you. She said not to worry because you'd come soon. Hearing Emily's innocent explanation should have comforted him, but something still felt strange. Daniel studied the woman again. There was something in her eyes, a kind of familiarity he couldn't explain, though he was certain he had never seen her before. He took a deep breath, trying to soften his tone. Thank you for looking after her. I must have gotten distracted. The words felt heavy with guilt. He hated admitting that he had taken his eyes off Emily, even for a moment. The woman simply nodded, her eyes lingering on Emily with a tenderness that unsettled Daniel even more. Then, before turning away, she bent slightly, close to Emily's ear. She whispered something Daniel could not hear. Emily's eyes grew wide with surprise, and she turned her little face up toward her father. Daddy, Emily said softly, she said she knows Mommy. Daniel froze, his whole body stiff. For a second, he couldn't process what his daughter had just said. The world around him seemed to fade, the laughter of children, the sound of footsteps, the warm sunshine, all of it blurred into silence. He turned quickly to the woman, his voice sharper now. What did you just say to her? The woman didn't answer. She gave Emily a final smile, a gentle look filled with something Daniel couldn't name, sadness, maybe affection, and then she stepped back. She moved quickly into the crowd, her figure disappearing among the people before Daniel could react. His heart raced. His late wife, Anna, had passed away years ago, and very few people knew much about her personal life. The story of her death had been quiet, private, something Daniel kept away from gossip and business circles. Hardly anyone outside close family even spoke of her. And yet, here was a stranger, whispering to his daughter that she knew Mommy. Daniel's grip on Emily tightened. She looked at him curiously, sensing his unease. Daddy, was she really Mommy's friend? He forced a smile for Emily's sake, though inside he was unsettled. I don't know, sweetheart, he said softly. Maybe. But inside, his thoughts were racing. Who was this woman? Why would she claim to know Anna? And why whisper it to Emily instead of saying it to him directly? He guided Emily back to their car, his protective instincts stronger than ever. As he buckled her safely into her seat, he kept glancing around, half expecting the woman to reappear. But she didn't. The park was just as cheerful as before, filled with families enjoying their day, as if nothing unusual had happened. Only for Daniel, everything had changed. On the drive home, Emily chattered happily, telling him about the swings, the ice cream she still wanted, and how the lady had held her hand so she wouldn't get scared. Daniel listened, nodding, but his mind was elsewhere. Each time Emily mentioned the woman, he felt both thankful and suspicious. Thankful that Emily had been safe, but suspicious about the strange whisper. When they reached home, Daniel carried Emily inside, even though she insisted she could walk. He wasn't ready to let her go just yet. He settled her with a bowl of ice cream and sat across from her, watching her eat, her face smeared with pink strawberry sweetness. He tried to push away the weight in his chest, but it wouldn't leave him. Later that night, after Emily had gone to bed, Daniel sat alone in his study. The room was filled with framed photographs of Anna, her smiling face at their wedding, her holding Emily as a baby, her laughing in the garden. He stared at one picture for a long time, his heart aching. Anna, he whispered into the quiet room, who was that woman? Why did she say she knows you? He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. Memories of his late wife washed over him. She had always been private, never speaking much about her past. There were things Daniel had never asked because he thought love was enough. Now, he wondered if there were pieces of her life he had never known, secrets she had never shared. The whisper to Emily wasn't just a casual comment. It felt intentional. The woman had chosen her words carefully. She hadn't told Daniel directly, she had told Emily, perhaps knowing the child would repeat it. But why? That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house made him alert, every shadow seemed suspicious. He checked Emily's room twice, watching her sleep peacefully with her teddy bear. She looked so safe, so innocent, unaware of the storm brewing in her father's mind. Daniel returned to his room, but he stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. He knew one thing for certain, the encounter at the park was not random. That woman hadn't simply been a stranger who helped a lost child. She had a reason to approach Emily. She had a reason to whisper about Anna. And Daniel couldn't rest until he found out why. The next morning, Daniel woke up earlier than usual. He hadn't slept much, and the little rest he managed was filled with restless dreams. In each dream, he saw the stranger's face, her calm eyes, and the way she whispered into Emily's ear before vanishing into the crowd. He sat on the edge of his bed, running his hands over his face, trying to clear his thoughts. The whisper still echoed in his mind, "She said she knows mommy." When Daniel walked into the kitchen, Emily was already there, sitting at the table with her teddy bear. The cook had served her cereal, and she was humming softly as she ate. Daniel forced a smile, hiding his exhaustion. He didn't want his little girl to feel his worry. "Did you sleep well, sweetheart?" he asked, kissing the top of her head. Emily nodded with her usual cheerful energy. "Yes, Daddy. I dreamed about the swings again. Can we go back today?" The question made Daniel pause. Returning to the park felt dangerous, but he didn't want to scare Emily with his fears. He sat beside her and gently brushed her hair. "Maybe soon. But today we'll do something fun at home. How about painting in the garden?" Emily grinned, clearly satisfied with the idea. She loved painting, and her collection of colorful pictures was growing every week. Daniel was relieved she didn't ask more about the woman, but deep down, he knew the topic wasn't finished. Later that day, while Emily played with her paints outside, Daniel retreated to his study. He opened his laptop and tried to focus on work, but his mind drifted back to the stranger. He replayed every detail he remembered: her appearance, her calm voice, her gentle smile, the sadness in her eyes. Nothing about her felt accidental. He considered calling the security staff who had been with them at the park, but he realized he hadn't told them what happened. In his panic, he had rushed Emily straight to the car. He picked up his phone and dialed his head of security. "I need you to review the cameras near the park yesterday. Look for a woman, early 30s, brown hair, tied back. She was near the fountain, holding my daughter. Send me everything you find." The guard promised to get back to him soon. Daniel hung up, leaning back in his chair, restless. He wanted answers, and he wanted them quickly. That evening, after Emily had gone to bed, Daniel found himself standing once again in front of the old photographs of Anna. He traced the frame of one picture where Anna was holding baby Emily, her eyes glowing with pride. "Why didn't you tell me everything, Anna?" he whispered. "Who was she? Why does she know about you?" The following day, the security team returned with footage. Daniel watched the video carefully. There was the woman, exactly as he remembered, walking near the fountain. She noticed Emily standing alone, approached her, and gently held her hand. Daniel zoomed in, studying her face. Calm, kind, almost familiar. But he still couldn't place where he had seen her before, if ever. His phone rang again. It was the head of security. "Sir, she didn't stay in the park after you left. We tracked her leaving through the east exit, but the cameras lose her beyond that point. She seems to know how to avoid being followed." Daniel frowned. That detail bothered him more than anything. A random passerby wouldn't know how to slip away unnoticed. This woman knew what she was doing. That night, Emily brought up the stranger again. She was sitting on the floor of her room, coloring, when she looked up and said, "Daddy, I like the lady. She told me mommy was very kind. She said mommy used to smile a lot." Daniel froze. His chest tightened. "Emily, she said that to you?" Emily nodded, still focused on her drawing. "Yes. She said mommy always wanted me to be happy. And then she smiled and told me you'd come soon. Then you came." Daniel sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, trying to hide the storm of emotions in his heart. The woman hadn't only whispered she knew Anna, she had spoken about her personality, her smile, and her wishes for Emily. That wasn't something a stranger could simply invent. Those were the words of someone who truly knew Anna. "Sweetheart," Daniel said softly, "if you ever see that lady again, you must tell me right away, okay?" Emily tilted her head, a little puzzled, but she nodded. "Okay, Daddy." Later, when Emily was asleep, Daniel stood by the window, staring at the city lights. He realized he couldn't ignore this anymore. The stranger had walked into their lives with purpose. She hadn't harmed Emily, in fact, she had comforted her. But why only reveal herself in whispers? Why vanish instead of explaining? The following weekend, Daniel returned to the park with Emily. He pretended it was just another father-daughter outing, but inside he was alert, scanning every face in the crowd. He didn't tell Emily what he was really looking for. Hours passed, but the woman never appeared. Emily played happily, running between the swings and the slide, while Daniel's eyes followed every corner of the park. He left that day disappointed, but more determined. Days turned into weeks. Daniel carried the image of the stranger with him everywhere. He asked quiet questions among acquaintances, trying not to reveal too much, but no one seemed to recognize her from his description. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that their paths would cross again. One evening, as he was putting Emily to bed, she surprised him with another detail. She yawned and whispered, "Daddy, the lady said mommy wanted me to draw flowers. She said mommy loved flowers." Daniel's breath caught. Anna had always loved flowers, especially lilies. She used to fill their home with them, saying they made the rooms feel alive. But it wasn't something many people knew. It was private, personal. Hearing it from Emily's lips, repeated from the stranger, sent a shiver through him. He kissed Emily's forehead and whispered good night, but his heart was restless. The whisper wasn't just words, it was a message. The woman knew Anna in a way that wasn't casual. She had to have been someone from Anna's past, someone who carried pieces of her life that Daniel had never seen. As he walked back to his study, Daniel made a silent decision. He would not let this mystery slip away. Whoever that woman was, she had stepped into Emily's life for a reason. And Daniel would do whatever it took to uncover the truth. Daniel's days began to feel heavier. The whisper had planted a seed in his mind that only grew with time. The woman's words kept returning, each time stronger than before. He tried to focus on business meetings, phone calls, and documents that piled on his desk, but his thoughts always wandered back to the park. He replayed her face in his mind, trying to remember if Anna had ever mentioned her. But there was nothing. His late wife had been private about many parts of her life, and now Daniel regretted never asking more. One evening, as Daniel was reading Emily a bedtime story, she interrupted him with a sudden thought. "Daddy," she said, hugging her teddy bear, "do you think mommy sent that lady to us?" Her innocent question made Daniel's chest tighten. He smiled softly and brushed her hair. "Maybe, sweetheart. Maybe she did." After putting Emily to sleep, he returned to his study, unable to shake the thought. If the woman really had known Anna, then she must have answers Daniel had never thought to seek. But why had she approached Emily instead of him? Why whisper instead of speaking openly? The mystery gnawed at him until he finally decided he couldn't wait for another chance meeting. He needed to find her. The next morning, Daniel contacted a trusted private investigator. He explained the situation carefully, leaving out his emotions but giving every detail he could. "I don't know her name," he admitted, "but I know how she looks. I have footage from the park. She told my daughter she knew my late wife. I need you to find her." The investigator promised to begin immediately. Days passed with no news. Daniel continued his normal routines with Emily, but underneath, he carried the quiet tension of waiting. He found himself watching crowds more carefully, scanning unfamiliar faces, and jumping at small coincidences, wondering if he'd see her again. Finally, one afternoon, the investigator called. "We found her," he said simply. Daniel's heart pounded. "Who is she?" "Her name is Claire. She lives in a small apartment on the other side of the city. She works at a local library. She has no record, nothing suspicious in her background. From what we can tell, she lives quietly." But the investigator hesitated. "She used to attend the same university as your late wife." The revelation hit Daniel like a wave. A connection at last. He thanked the investigator and ended the call, his thoughts racing. Claire had known Anna in her youth. That explained how she knew personal details. But why had she never appeared until now? Why approach Emily in a park instead of contacting him directly? That night, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about it. He paced his study, torn between anger, curiosity, and hope. He wanted to protect Emily, but he also wanted the truth. He knew he had to meet Claire. The next day, he drove to the library where she worked. His car stood out among the modest buildings, but he ignored the stairs. Inside, the library was quiet, filled with the soft rustle of pages. And there she was, Claire, arranging books on a shelf. She looked almost exactly as she had at the park, except calmer, as though she belonged in this quiet space. When she noticed him, her expression froze for a moment, then softened. "Mr. Carter," she said gently, as if she had been expecting him. Daniel's chest tightened. "So you do know who I am?" Claire nodded. "Yes. I know you, and I knew Anna." Her voice carried both warmth and sorrow. Daniel wanted to demand answers, but something about her calmness made him hesitate. "Why didn't you tell me at the park?" he asked instead. She looked away for a moment, her fingers tracing the edge of a book. "Because I wasn't sure if you were ready to hear it. I thought maybe Emily would carry my words more softly than I could." Daniel frowned. "You whispered to my daughter about her mother. You scared me. Do you have any idea what that felt like?" Claire lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry. That was never my intention. I only wanted Emily to know something beautiful about her mother. I couldn't stop myself." Daniel studied her face. There was no sign of deceit, only genuine emotion. Still, he pressed on. "Tell me the truth, Claire. How did you know Anna?" Claire drew in a slow breath. "We met at university. She was my closest friend. We shared everything: dreams, secrets, hopes. She was like a sister to me. But after she met you, life carried us in different directions. She was happy, and I didn't want to disturb that. I stayed away, but I never stopped caring for her." Daniel listened, his chest heavy. The thought of Anna having a deep friendship he had never known about stirred something inside him: curiosity, but also regret. "Why now?" he asked quietly. "Why appear after all these years?" Claire's eyes glistened as she replied, "Because I promised her. Before she passed, she asked me to watch over Emily if I ever had the chance. She wanted her daughter to grow up knowing more about her mother's heart, not just pictures and stories." Daniel felt his breath catch. His wife had never told him about such a promise. He wanted to doubt Claire, to question her words, but the emotion in her eyes felt too real to dismiss. For a long moment, Silence stretched between them. Finally, Daniel said softly, "Why didn't she tell me about you?" Claire smiled faintly, though it was tinged with sadness. "Anna loved you deeply. But there were parts of her past she kept quiet, not because they were dark, but because she wanted to start fresh with you. I was part of that past. She believed you two were enough for each other." Daniel looked down, his emotions swirling. Anger, sadness, relief, and longing all fought for space inside him. He thought of Emily, of how much she missed her mother, of the small details she craved to know. Perhaps Claire could give her those pieces. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. "If what you say is true, then I owe it to Emily to let her know you. But I need to be sure you mean no harm." Claire nodded quickly. "I don't want anything from you, Mr. Carter. I only want to keep my promise to my friend. To give Emily a chance to feel her mother's love through stories and memories." Daniel studied her one last time. For the first time since the park, he felt the tension in his chest ease slightly. Maybe this encounter wasn't something to fear. Maybe it was something meant to be. When he returned home that evening, Emily was waiting in the garden, her hands messy with paint. She ran to him, smiling brightly. "Daddy. Look, I painted flowers again just like Mommy loved." Daniel lifted her into his arms, his heart swelling with both love and uncertainty. He kissed her cheek, whispering, "Sweetheart, you might be meeting someone soon. Someone who knew Mommy very well." Emily's eyes lit up. "Really? Will she tell me stories about Mommy?" Daniel hugged her close. "Yes, she will." As he held his daughter, Daniel realized that meeting Claire had opened a door he hadn't even known existed. He didn't know where it would lead, but he felt a strange sense of hope. Maybe Anna had left behind more than memories. Maybe she had left a bridge, a way for Emily to feel her mother's love even after she was gone. And Daniel knew he couldn't ignore that gift. The next few days were unlike anything Daniel had experienced before. He felt as if a new door had opened in his life, a door that connected the past he had buried with the present he was holding onto. Meeting Claire had stirred emotions he didn't expect: confusion, hope, and an ache that reminded him of Anna all over again. For years, he had carried his grief in silence, believing he alone was the guardian of Anna's memory. Now he realized someone else carried pieces of her too, and those pieces might belong to Emily as much as to him. One quiet evening, Daniel sat in the living room with Emily cuddled beside him. She was watching a cartoon, but he wasn't paying attention to the screen. His thoughts were on Claire. He wondered how Emily would react to hearing stories about her mother from someone who had truly known her. He also wondered if he could trust Claire enough to let her into their lives. Emily's voice broke his thoughts. "Daddy, when can I see the lady again? The one who knew Mommy?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, then kissed the top of her head. "Soon, sweetheart. I think it's time you meet her properly." Emily's eyes lit up. "Will she tell me about Mommy's favorite songs? And what she liked to eat? And the dresses she wore?" Her excitement tugged at Daniel's heart. He realized that while he had done his best to keep Anna's memory alive, there were things he simply didn't know, small details that could make Emily feel even closer to her mother. And Claire, whether he liked it or not, held those details. The following weekend, Daniel arranged to meet Claire at a quiet cafe. He chose a place away from his usual circles, somewhere Emily could feel comfortable and he could observe without interruption. As they walked in together, Emily holding his hand tightly, Daniel noticed Claire already seated at a corner table. She stood when she saw them, her face brightening with warmth. Emily let go of Daniel's hand and walked toward her without fear. "Hi," she said cheerfully, "Daddy said you knew Mommy." Claire knelt down so she was at Emily's height. Her eyes softened, and her voice was tender as she replied, "Yes, I did. Your Mommy was my very best friend." Daniel watched the exchange carefully. He expected Emily to shy away, but instead, she leaned closer, curiosity filling her small face. "Can you tell me about her?" Claire smiled and began to speak. She told Emily about the time she and Anna had stayed up all night studying at the university library, how Anna always carried a little notebook where she wrote her dreams, and how she had a habit of humming softly whenever she was nervous. Emily listened as if each word were a treasure. Daniel sat quietly, his emotions shifting as he heard stories he had never known. He pictured Anna as a young woman, laughing with her friend, carrying her notebook, humming without realizing it. He had known her as his wife, his partner, the mother of his child, but here was another version of her, one he had never seen, yet one that felt just as real. Emily's eyes sparkled with joy. "Did mommy like drawing too?" "Because I do." Claire nodded. She loved drawing flowers. She used to say flowers made her feel calm. That's why she always wore dresses with little flower prints. Daniel's chest tightened. He remembered those dresses, but he had never known the meaning behind them. He glanced at his daughter, who was smiling widely, as though she had just discovered a secret bond with her mother. For the rest of the afternoon, Claire shared stories, small, simple memories that made Anna feel alive again in the room. Emily laughed, asked questions, and clapped her hands with delight. Daniel stayed mostly quiet, but inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. After they left the cafe, Emily chattered non-stop in the car. "Daddy, did you hear? Mommy used to sing while cooking. And she likes strawberry cake, just like me. And she was scared of thunderstorms. Just like I am." Daniel smiled at her excitement, his heart warming. He realized this was what Emily had been missing. Pictures and bedtime stories weren't enough. She needed living memories, real voices to carry the truth of who her mother had been. That night, after putting Emily to bed, Daniel sat alone in his study. He stared at the framed photographs of Anna and whispered softly, "You kept secrets, Anna. Not bad ones, but pieces of yourself I never knew. And now, through Claire, you're still teaching me. You're still here, in some way." In the weeks that followed, Claire became a quiet presence in their lives. She didn't intrude or demand anything. She visited sometimes, sharing memories with Emily, showing her old photographs from their university days, even gifting her a small notebook like the one Anna used to carry. Emily treasured it, calling it her mommy's book, and filled its pages with colorful drawings of flowers, rainbows, and her family. Daniel noticed how Emily's world seemed brighter. She no longer asked as many sad questions about why her mother had gone. Instead, she spoke joyfully about the things she now knew. It was as if the gaps in her heart were slowly being filled with light. One evening, Daniel invited Claire to dinner at their home. It was a quiet meal, filled with laughter as Emily showed off her paintings. After Emily had gone to bed, Daniel and Claire sat in the living room. For the first time, he allowed himself to speak openly. "I was angry at you," he admitted. "When you whispered to my daughter that day, I felt fear like I never had before. But now I see why you did it. You wanted her to know. You wanted to keep your promise." Claire's eyes softened. "Anna meant everything to me. And when she asked me to look out for Emily, I thought I would never get the chance. But when I saw her in the park, standing there alone, I felt it was fate. I couldn't walk away." Daniel nodded slowly. "Maybe it was fate. Maybe Anna wanted you to find us." For a long time, they sat in silence, each lost in thought. Then Claire spoke again, her voice quiet but steady. "You're doing a wonderful job with Emily, Daniel. She's happy, she's loved, and she feels safe. That's all Anna would have wanted." The words touched him deeply. For years, he had doubted himself, wondering if he was enough for his daughter, if he was giving her all that she needed. Hearing that reassurance made his eyes sting with unshed tears. When Claire finally left that night, Daniel stood by the window, watching her walk away. He realized she wasn't just a stranger who had appeared in their lives. She was a piece of Anna's story, a bridge between the past and the present, someone who could help both him and Emily heal. As weeks turned into months, life slowly settled into a new rhythm. Emily grew more confident, her laughter filling the house with joy. Daniel still worked hard, but he no longer felt the same emptiness when he looked at his daughter. He no longer felt like he was carrying Anna's memory alone. One sunny afternoon, while watching Emily paint in the garden, Daniel finally allowed himself to breathe deeply, without the constant weight of fear and grief. He realized that sometimes, life brings people into our path for reasons we don't understand at first. The stranger in the park had once frightened him, but now he knew she had been sent for a reason. Emily looked up from her painting and shouted happily, "Daddy, look! I drew Mommy holding flowers, and she's smiling at us." Daniel walked over, kneeling beside her. He gazed at the picture, his heart swelling with pride and love. He wrapped his arm around his daughter and whispered, "She is smiling at us, sweetheart. She always will." And in that moment, Daniel understood. The whisper that had once frozen him in fear had instead unlocked a future filled with healing, love, and the strength to carry Anna's memory forward, not in silence, but in stories, laughter, and the bright eyes of the little girl who was their greet.